Have you ever been reading, listening to, or witnessing something so resonant that, out of nowhere, everything goes still? Not physically, but emotionally. A particular transcendence so intense I almost mean it literally, as if you've been lifted out of your physical existence, leaving all your grudges, hatred, and stresses behind. Indeed, you aren't angry at anyone or anything, you are just so grateful to be alive in this instance. A brief moment where you are no longer an inhabitant but a spectator, as if you are viewing and feeling the world all at once. Trees are no longer just trees, but are instead individual leaves and branches that bear their own distinct existence. It's not a delusion, a placebo, or wishful thinking. It's a real human capacity that can genuinely be realized. And if you haven't experienced it before, you probably think I'm going schizophrenic. But I'm not, for this phenomenon has been documented on numerous occasions, even in the most grave of circumstances. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor, recounts moments where, despite the intense physical and emotional hardship, prisoners experienced the beauty of art and nature as never before, which even displays their awareness of the horrifying conditions present before them. Nian Shang, imprisoned in solitary confinement for over 6 years during China's Cultural Revolution, also recounts an uplifting of her soul and moments where, while her body sat in the cell, her spirit would escape through the window to freedom, all from simply witnessing weeds growing or a spider spinning webs, small and otherwise mundane moments of nature. These are just two out of the numerous accounts of this strange surreal phenomenon. And I tell you about these moments in particular not because this experience is limited to grave circumstances, but because it unequivocally shows that the word happiness alone fails to describe it. Indeed, it's not happiness, it's a unique emotional experience that happens to produce happiness as one of its byproducts. An experience often called euphoria. But what is it exactly? When does it arrive, and how can it be attained? If you search up the term now, the first thing you undoubtedly see is the show, Euphoria. I mean, when you first read the title of this video, you probably thought of the show first and the feeling second, which sucks. Not because the show sucks, but because it redefines a word in a way that strips it of its original gravity. It takes euphoria as an experience of reality-altering clarity and transforms it into a feeling of disassociation through vice and excess. One emerges internally, in which meaning becomes undeniably clear, while one emerges from external stimulation, where meaning doesn't reveal itself, but is suspended altogether. If you still don't fully understand the distinction between true euphoria and conventional euphoria as portrayed in the show, ask yourself this: when the feeling passes, are you left with clarity or emptiness? If that realization has clicked, then let's continue, because fully understanding this feeling requires confronting an uncomfortable truth about it. First, we have to acknowledge that this phenomenon is irrational, that it is contrary to human reason itself, and that is part of what makes it feel so surreal. Why? Because it can appear even in moments of relentless physical hardship and mental strain, conditions where it should be logically impossible. It's just deeply perplexing to think how complete bliss can be produced even in the most horrifying circumstances. It's like finding light somewhere the sun can't reach. It shouldn't exist, but somehow it does. The feeling isn't just irrational, but also pure, untouched by anything else. Stress, anger, fear, sadness, all dissolve away. It's as if a veil has been lifted from the empirical world, not revealing a different reality, but a deeper one, where even the smallest details carry overwhelming significance. And suddenly, you are forgiving rather than vengeful, grateful rather than numb, and brave instead of timid. Nothing else matters, not in the nihilistic sense, but in the sense that you are no longer affected by worldly conditions. And this is where the term transcendence fits this experience so well, because it's as if it surpasses all the intuitive laws by which the world usually operates. Happiness is merely the consequence of weightlessness and immense clarity, an unsustainable combination of joy and gratitude just for existing. Naturally, the question is then, when does this feeling arrive? Look, I'm gonna be honest, I've explored phenomenological experiences before on this channel, but nothing has truly resisted an explanation like this. And then I realized that resistance in and of itself is the answer. For euphoria, at its core, arrives unexpectedly, but not in the way you think. Let me explain. We've already said that euphoria is an irrational experience, not only because it can appear even in places it shouldn't, but also because it's not like a math problem in which I can give you numbers and you can navigate to the solution through logical deduction. See, you can't reason to euphoria like you can with other feelings, because most feelings are cooperative. If you want sadness, there's a movie for that. If you want happiness, there's content specifically engineered to give it to you. Melancholy, authenticity, inspiration, all can be felt if pursued, even if it's just for a moment's time. But euphoria doesn't cooperate in the same way, because the moment you try and chase it, the moment it stops being euphoria at all. Why? Because euphoria fundamentally demands that the self stops operating. The self that always compares, that always sets expectations, that's always stuck in the past or future. Think about a previous action you just performed, like clicking this video. What was your end goal in doing so? To relax? To satisfy curiosity? To quell boredom? Whatever it is, consciously or not, your actions were inherently future-oriented, for they had a purpose, an end goal in mind. And that's the problem. Euphoria doesn't live in the future or past, it lives in the now. See, actions by themselves are just that, actions. But when the self is introduced, actions are no longer just actions, but instead they become a means to attain X, Y, or Z. Everything you do has to have an end goal or be optimized. So when I say that euphoria requires the self to stop operating, what I mean is that literally, by necessity, euphoria requires a state of no evaluation, no goal, no is this good. If that hasn't clicked, think about it this final way. Have you ever really needed to go to bed early, but couldn't fall asleep because you were constantly aware about trying to fall asleep? Euphoria acts in a similar fashion. The more you are aware of it, the more the feeling becomes out of reach. That's why if you've experienced euphoria, you know how short-lived the experience is, because our sense of overwhelming presence in the moment is usually quickly broken by the self coming back. And suddenly, it starts to make sense how this feeling can appear even in conditions of unimaginable human suffering. Because in what other circumstances is the self more destroyed than in these horrifying places? When people are stripped of their identity to be treated as numbers or statistics, and when all hope is genuinely lost, actions naturally lose their purpose, for there is no future to worry about. This is by no means to romanticize suffering, but to solely point out how extreme conditions can forcibly silence the self. Now that we know what euphoria is and when it can arrive, the remaining question yet to be answered is, how can you attain it? If you've watched up until now, you can probably tell that there is no simple solution. I mean, there's a reason why you've either experienced euphoria very few times or not at all. But that isn't to say that this feeling is impossible to reach. And if you think back to the accounts of euphoria I gave you, along with maybe your own experiences with this feeling, it seems as though there is something that triggers it, which is nature, or better put, aesthetics, the deep appreciation of a sensory stimulant, whether it be music, nature itself, or stillness. In fact, the only time I personally vividly remember experiencing euphoria exactly as we've described was when I was studying in my college dorm, listening to the most arbitrary study music on autoplay. And for some reason, the feeling just hit me, which was really weird because it's not like I particularly liked the song. It was my first time hearing it, and I didn't put it on my playlist or anything after. It just resonated in that specific moment to such a great extent. And again, that's the key. I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't trying to impose beauty into the song so that I could like it better or something of the sort. I had no expectations to begin with, and I wasn't trying to create any either. See, aesthetics invite euphoria not because aesthetics are beautiful, but because it's as if they act as gaps in the veil we've described earlier. Gaps that can only be perceived once the self is quiet. What does that exactly mean? Look, you could see the exact same sunset 100 times. All of those times, the sunset is beautiful, but only once might that sunset invoke euphoria. Because in that one particular instance, you are no longer recognizing beauty, as for the first time, you've stopped looking for it entirely. In this instance, there's nothing to understand or extract, because you aren't thinking instrumentally. And in that silence of the self, the sunset no longer becomes a means to serve you in some way, but instead becomes an opening into a deeper reality. A moment where the world suddenly isn't just something for you to look at, but something you have the privilege of bearing witness.